So wait, 17 years after Juventus got caught in a refereeing scandal which saw the club get demoted to the second division and stripped of the 2 Serie A titles that they won during that time, so you think they would have learned their lesson? Well, they got caught cheating again? I mean, why can't they just go out and win fair and square? Yes! What is up, everybody, and welcome to another exhilarating installment of What Would You Do? Because this time, we're talking about Italy's most successful calcio club, Juventus, who just got docked 15 points this season, dropping from 2nd to 10th, and that's because they were found guilty of false accounting and transfer irregularities, also known as cooking the books. Now, initially, Juventus was charged as being cheaters along with 8 other Italian clubs, Genoa, Empoli, Novara, Vercelli, and the 3 Ps, Parma, Pescara, and Pisa. But eventually, all 9 of these clubs were cleared of the charges that were levied against them. But let me explain what they were doing with a hypothetical. So let's say Juve sells Paul Pogba to Manchester United for $120 million and then buys Cristiano Ronaldo for the same amount, $120 million. So it looks even in the books. 120 comes in, 120 goes out. However, Juve would split up the 120 million for Ronaldo over the course of his contract. And let's say that was a 4-year deal. So they would report it as only 30 million per year over the 4 years. They would spread it all out, which makes a difference in year 1 because that's the year when, in this example, they sold Pogba for 120. So you take the 120 for Pogba and only minus 30 for Ronaldo. And for all of you math majors out there, that would record a $90 million profit. Now, apparently, this is how most of the clubs in Europe conduct their business, so there's really nothing to see here, but it does give us some context as to why Juve got in trouble, because what they were doing was making player trades with the other clubs I've already mentioned, the 8 other Italian clubs, but they were doing it in a way where no money was being exchanged. They were just straight swaps, you know? You take my player and I'll take yours kind of thing, and that allowed Juve and the clubs involved to put whatever value on the players that they wanted, which was, more often than not, a very inflated price, much more than the players were worth. However, why they got cleared the first time around is that the lawyers for all the Italian clubs stated that no one can put an objective valuation on a player, and therefore, no one has the right to say whether a transfer fee is fair or cheap or inflated. In fact, any player, or if you wanted to get a coach like Graham Potter to Chelsea, or buy a team, or something you buy at the grocery store, in short, any tradable good is worth what the market says it's worth. And if 2 clubs agree to whatever that price is for a specific player or players, then that's what it is. And the Italian courts agreed with the club's lawyers. But then, new evidence emerged via wiretaps and handwritten notes. What is this crazy mafia-like stuff, which confirmed that the clubs knew they were doing some shady stuff. And because Juve are a publicly traded company on the Italian stock exchange, which subjects them to very strict guidelines on what companies are and are not reporting financially, this case was reopened and Juve got hit with accounting fraud. On top of that, there was a separate investigation into something that happened in 2020 during the peak of the pandemic, when apparently all of the members of Juve's first team signed new deals to reduce their salaries and help the club through a tough and unprecedented time. I remember Barcelona players doing something similar. It was reported that the players would voluntarily give up 4 months worth of wages, but they allegedly only ended up giving up 1 month's worth, even though Juve's books said the players gave up the full 4 months, which allowed the club to avoid paying taxes on those large sums, which in turn helped them balance everything out accounting-wise, but they were lying. And now I'm starting to connect some dots, because do you remember during the World Cup when every single member of Juventus's board resigned at the same time? I do. I was in Qatar thinking, what's happening with the old lady? But then I quickly forgot all about it because the World Cup was so good and there were multiple games happening every day, but it's all starting to make sense now. And with the criminal investigation, and I assume a new sporting investigation being opened again too with this new evidence, and Juve potentially being subjected to a possible financial fair play investigation as well, even though I consider financial fair play to be an absolute joke because clubs figure out ways to try and cheat the system anyway, just like Juve tried to do here. And anyway, Juve are in trouble, okay? That's the long and short of it. 17 years after they got in trouble in a referee scandal back in the day. So maybe instead of them acting like they're innocent, they should lean into their shadiness and change their club motto from fino alla fine, which translates to until the end, to if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And how do you say that in Italian, I wonder? Is it Vaffanculo casa? Vaffanculo, that doesn't sound right. I think maybe it's se non stai barando, non ci stai provando. And then, of course, you got to add in Forza Juve. Anyway, since we already know what the club has to do, which is kick everyone out and start over, which is a process that has already begun with their recent naming of Gianluca Ferrero as the new president. Not that they had any choice with regard to that position, in particular, since their former president, Andrea Agnelli, whose family still owns the team and has for 100 years. Well, that dude's been banned for 2 years due to this scandal. So the next issue is, what would you do if your manager Maxi Allegri and the players? With this 15-point deduction, Juve have 0 chance of winning the league. I just got to get it out there and just say it. Not that they did anyway, though, let's be honest, given how well Napoli are playing. Though Napoli is known to consistently choke down the stretch, I just feel like Napoli's going to figure it out. Anyway, back to Juve. I bet Allegri and his players might think that they can still claim a spot in the Champions League, which financially would bring in some much-needed moolah to help offset the crazy amount that they've been losing over the last few years. And of course, it would make them an attractive destination for players that want to play in Europe's biggest competition with one of Europe's most decorated clubs. But can Juve overcome this new 14-point gap to get into the top 4 with only 19 games left to go? And if they can't, and maybe miss out on playing in Europe altogether, will current players want to leave? Will other players want to come? Will they even have the budget to sign anyone new moving forward? I got a lot of questions, and I don't know if I've got a lot of answers. So these next 4 or 5 months of the season could really dictate what happens to Juve's short-term future, and I'm very curious to see how it all plays out. Now, if I was playing for them and we didn't finish in a spot to compete in the Champions or even the Europa League, I would be considering my options elsewhere because I think this situation is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And then finally, what would you do if you're a Juventus fan? For a club of this stature, this whole thing is put a bag on your head embarrassing. Like, have some goddamn respect for yourself. Anyway, let me know what you would do if you were the authorities, the league, UEFA. I mean, was the punishment enough? Should it have been harsher since they feel like repeat offenders? And then what would you do if you were the club, the players, the fans? Pick whatever you prefer. After you hit like and subscribe, of course, it would mean a lot to have your continued support. And I already cannot wait to read your comments about this absolute dumpster fire of a situation. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, I'll see you soon. Later.